and thank you to all of you for giving up an hour of your time on this February afternoon to come along and reflect with me on how Laudato Si can enhance the Catholic identity of our universities. Now, I am going to share my screen, and which I have done already. Hopefully you can see it. I'm going to make it full screen in any second now, so that should make a difference. Right, hopefully you can see the beautiful campus of the University of Glasgow, and it is taken in one of those very small number of days when there are no clouds in the sky. And what we are going to do today is take ourselves through the document Laudato Si and some of the Global Compact on Education. Now, what I'm really trying to do is look at the improvement of the educational experience and the reach of the Catholic University. I'll not be veering too much into the important territory of issues around climate change and the economy, and neither will I be looking at chaplaincy services and such like. All of these things are very much part of the life of the Catholic University, but the focus today is otherwise. Now, contemporary Catholic universities are the inheritors of a tradition of higher education with roots in the time we call the Middle Ages. Now, this is not a reason for pride or triumphalism, but a recognition that the university as an institution is a fruit of the Church's desire to educate. Now, contemporary Catholic, I have a deep interest in how these universities can offer a creative breathing space for educators who are interested in the nexus uniting education, culture, and human flourishing. As I've explained there, I work in the University of Glasgow. Although founded in 1451 by Pope Nicholas V, it is not currently a Catholic university, but our motto is Via Veritas Via. We are the fourth oldest university in the Anglophone world and the second oldest in Scotland, a small country but with 3 pre-Reformation and papally founded universities. And the University of Glasgow School of Education has a special mission agreed by the University, the Scottish Government and the Bishops' Conference of Scotland to prepare teachers for Catholic schools. And in 2018, we had the great pleasure of hosting the annual Colloquium of ACISE in Glasgow. And I know some of you on this call came to Glasgow for that 3 wonderful days in 2018, even though we had the remnants of winter snow, making it quite a cold experience for most of you. Now, the Papal Bull of Foundation of the University of Glasgow, which is still current and is on the website of the university, contains the following statement as the reason for its establishment, and it's on the slide there. To the end that there the Catholic faith may be spread, the simple instructed, equity and judgment upheld, reason flourish, the minds of men illuminated, and their understandings enlightened. The writer of this, Nicholas V, was himself an advocate of scholarship and the founder of the Vatican Library. And we see in this statement a summary of the principles of Christian Humanism, and this possibly could be a way ahead for Catholic universities today. Let's see. Moving in now to the second part of this introduction, and turning to Laudato Si and the Global Compact, what do these important documents contribute to the world of Catholic higher education in our famed secular age? As Charles Taylor has reminded us, and I quote, "Our question is how we moved from a condition in 1500 in which it was hard not to believe in God to our present situation just after 2000 when he was writing, where this has become quite easy for many," end of quote. Now, I'm very conscious of the admonition of Pope Francis that the Church cannot be just another NGO offering a range of important services to humanity. Rather, it must present the face of Christ to all. And I ask today what this means for Catholic universities in the 21st century. I also bear in mind that 5 trends in higher education which IFCU has identified as being especially relevant today, and they're on the slide. These are hybrid teaching, internationalization under threat, skills over knowledge, the devalued college degree, and more faculty casualization. I think each of these deserves a seminar, at least one seminar on each of them. For today, I simply present him as a backdrop to the presentation, although it is important to shine the light of Catholic identity here too. And I will try in part 3 to show how they could be addressed. So the talk today is in 3 parts. In part 1, I pose 2 research questions. I then consider what we might mean by the phrase Catholic identity, integrating as far as possible the work of IFCU, a self-declared prophetic organisation, into the wider discussion. In part 2, I ask what Laudato Si and the Global Compact offer Catholic universities, and doing so by fairly close reference to extracts from these documents. In part 3, I offer what I think are some practical suggestions to guide the future development of the Catholic identity of universities. And I will refer again at this stage to the questions set out in part 1. So what are these 2 questions? Well, we could have had 10 questions, 11 questions, 12, so many. But the first one is, how do Catholic universities enhance the quality of their research and teaching? And by this question, I bring to light how Catholic universities can manifest an excellence which is not just measured by standard quality assurance or enhancement methods or other metrics like research power, impact, status of academic staff. This is not to say that such approaches are always and everywhere harmful, but Catholic universities should strive to be at the forefront of debates on how to improve research and teaching, and thus become even more attractive to all. And the second question, how do we address injustice in the context of the Catholic vision of the human person? Well, the experience of being at a Catholic university for both students and staff is critical. The starting point for me is that being a student or member of staff at a Catholic university should have a different feel to it. To address injustice in general, we must first act justly in concrete situations, and this means towards staff and students, allowing them to experience a community which has human flourishing as its core, at its core. It is not enough to talk about injustice. The Catholic institution should be a model of Catholic social teaching in action. It is not possible, of course, to address such burning questions in depth in a short presentation. I do, however, try to offer some ideas to guide local reflection before returning to them in the final part of the talk. So what do we mean by this highly charged phrase, Catholic identity? To address this question, we need first to consider what is the nature of Catholic identity in general, not just in education. What does it mean in a world where people have or claim to have multiple identities? In essence, what does it mean to be Catholic? Is this our primary identity or merely one alongside other identities? And how flexible can our response to this important question be? Well, of course, sociologists, and there might be some of you on the programme today, on the webinar today, can give us a range of examples of how Catholics describe themselves and what their particular commitment to specific religious practices is. Such data is helpful, indeed essential, if we are to see even glimpses of a clear pathway ahead, because to hide from data, as we know, is to hide from reality. If these are big questions for individuals, they are equally important for institutions. Indeed, to what extent is it possible for an institution to have a specific identity as such? In the context of the Catholic university, we have 2 terms, Catholic, university, each of which must work in dialogue with each other and bring their many layers of meaning to the other. As someone once said to me, a Catholic university, to be Catholic, must first be a very good university. To find the seed of a response to the question of Catholic identity, a starting point could be found in theology, in particular in the idea of the Church as communion, the notion of communio. By using this ecclesiological framing, we see the Catholic university at the heart of the Church. Communio allows for, indeed demands, a spirituality of love, which does not restrict, but offers support to the search for meaning on which we are all engaged. It locates the Catholic University within the body of the Church, energised by its beating heart of faith, but with space to move freely in the world of higher education. This is where it becomes a place of encounter with people of all religious traditions and none, thus offering a particular contribution to the new evangelisation in the world of ideas. Reflection on Catholic identity cannot avoid the question of culture. What is it? The historian and anthropologist Christopher Dawson said that we should study Christian culture as a social reality, as this offers a framework which prevents liberal studies from becoming a set of unrelated specialisms. Is he correct? Well, I suppose time will tell. So the promotion of Catholic identity is not a straightforward task. And I suggest that the phrase Catholic identity cannot be just one strand of a Catholic university's policy framework or mission statement. Rather, it is the core of all its activities and a key reference point for institutional evaluation and related future development. And just a quick word about evaluation. While we would not wish to turn religious devotion into a checklist of observable practices and stated beliefs, neither should we see the identity of Catholic universities as simply being adherence to a long checklist of practices and policies. Catholic mission or identity, therefore, is not a limitation, although a narrowly understood Catholic identity, which seeks only to serve Catholics, would of course limit and indeed damage the mission of the Catholic University. Rather, this identity should be a source of energy and ambition. Catholic universities, therefore, would do well to reflect on the ecclesiological dimension of the word Catholic as universal, open to others, having the fullness of faith. Like the first apostles, the Catholic University is, or should be, marked by a sense of adventure and must be marked by both prudence and daring. Are we prepared to go out into the deep? Turning now to IFCU, and the sense of adventure and risk-taking is actually a call to prophetic witness. The official record of IFCU takes up this challenge and offers a neat summary of just how aggiornamento and ressourcement, two strong theological terms, are at the heart of the mission of the Catholic University. The slide there is the second part, is a photograph of the book of the official record of the history of IFCU. And this wonderful quote from inside the book from Michel Jardin: the true sense of IFCU's mission is to constantly reinvent in a spirit of continuity and openness that combines fond memories and future aspirations. End of quote. But to what do we aspire? And how do we build on the legacies we have inherited? It is important to consider again the motto of IFCU, again it's on the slide, Sciat ut serviat, to know in order to serve. This is a worthy reminder, if we need reminding, of the underpinning principles of the Catholic University. But two questions naturally emerge from critical reflection on the motto. To know, Sciat, but to know what? The answer, borrowed from St. John Henry Newman, is universal knowledge, that treasury of humanity which, like a proper understanding of tradition, is rooted in the past, but continues to grow and develop today. It is not static. And to serve, ut serviat, to serve whom? The Catholic University is called to be of service to the wider church and society. It is not a place of refuge from the machinations of wider academia. At its best, it is a site of intellectual challenge, promoting staff and students to act justly in a world which cries out for witness to the truth. Its identity is boosted by its service to all. So having set out some broad ideas on how to handle the three words Catholic University and mission of identity, I now focus on what Laudato Si and the Global Compact on Education can offer Catholic universities as they continue to reflect on that phrase. It's really not my intention here, for the limits of space and time, to deal directly with all of what Laudato Si proposes, how could we, but simply to shine some light on aspects of chapter 6, which is the chapter with most to say about education. When Laudato Si chapter 6 is read alongside the Global Compact from last October, it is clear that we have some urgent educational, social and pastoral issues before us. I now want to identify some relevant points from, and I begin with Laudato Si, and I've got the summary there on the slide. So Laudato Si is much in the news today for many good reasons. It seems to have struck a chord with people who see it as an endorsement of a way of thinking which is necessary to meet these challenges we face today, urgent challenges. But it's the educational angle I want to look at today. So beginning with the educational challenge, Laudato Si, paragraphs 202 and 209. In using the language of educational challenge, Pope Francis is developing what Pope Benedict XVI called in 2007 the educational emergency. And for Pope Benedict, this emergency, which is strong words as we can see, is the consequence of a failure to transmit basic human, cultural and religious values in our families and educational institutions. He is referring principally to schools, but his words could also refer to universities. It's a call for genuine dialogue on the appropriate aims of education as seen through the lenses of philosophy and Christian anthropology. The diagnosis of an emergency is in fact a cri de coeur for a renewed understanding of the aims of education. For Pope Benedict, educational bodies must be rooted in a search for truth and meaning. It's a journey undertaken in community, not as isolated individuals. He challenges, as we would, a hyper-individualization of education, which essentially tears the fabric of shared traditions of learning. Now, Pope Francis has agreed with and developed this trenchant and educational analysis offered by his predecessor. And in 202, Pope Francis says, and I quote, "A great cultural, spiritual and educational challenge stands before us, and it will demand we set out on the long path of renewal." End of quote. What he is doing, in fact, is offering some tools to the churches or for the church's response to the emergency. In paragraph 209, Pope Francis connects the educational challenge to issues raised by, I quote, extreme consumerism and affluence, end of quote, and in so doing suggests that the growth of material prosperity in some parts of the world, with the connotation of extreme individualism, has damaged the shared ownership of the Catholic educational tradition. There's of course much more we could say and would say about this in other times and other places. Referring now to the care for small things, Pope Francis reminds us that the road to ecological and educational reform starts at home. It's a rather unglamorous reminder that grand projects cannot replace easily the formation received in the family. Because, and I quote, "In the family we first learn how to show love and respect for life. We are taught the proper use of things, order and cleanliness, etc." It's a quote which is probably familiar to many people, or the ideas. While the Catholic University is on a different scale to the life of a family and school, a Catholic identity, I'm sure we agree in this, is not reduced simply to slogans and policy statements. It must be shown in the care taken in what seems like but are not small things, in the corporate life of the university. This life is damaged if these small things, of course, are neglected. Just one example. In academia and in schools, of course, we prefer to teach in lecture halls which are clean, where the technology works as it should, and where there is sufficient heat and or ventilation. Is that obvious? Of course it is. Yet lecture rooms do not clean themselves. So the Catholic University must invest properly in the fabric of the institution. And this could be as important as the quality of the teaching staff. But it bears out this notion of caring for the small things. Now, care for the poor and the marginalised. This should go without saying, but how can it be done? What practical steps can we take to give life to the common phrase, option for the poor? For Pope Francis, the response comes from reflection on the phrase he uses quite a lot in Laudato Si, and the phrase is, or the term is, ecological education, meaning for him, I quote, an education in responsible simplicity of life, in grateful contemplation of God's world, and in concern for the needs of the poor and the protection of the environment. The phrase simplicity of life should make us pause. It's a challenge for an institution, but also a challenge addressed to each of us personally. As academics, we are the collegium. The university of which we may be part is not just an outside body to which we are attached solely via a contract of employment. It is more than that. So do we really aim for simplicity in our way of life? In the university's wider policy framework, are we ready to make concessions in fees, etc., even if this could have an impact on the finances of the institution, which then might have an impact on salaries, including our own salaries? But I'm very much aware that staff in many Catholic bodies and institutions are already living this heroic virtue, but it is important to mention it here. We are also reminded by Pope Francis that we are called to show appreciation for the opportunities that we already have. And he calls us in 222 to return to that simplicity, to that gratitude for small things and for all the opportunities that these come to us through our life, our work in education. And perhaps we too should be aware of the joy and perhaps the privilege of working in academia, if that's what we do, playing a part in research and dissemination of Newman's famed universal knowledge. It's a vocation to seek truth. So the staff in the Catholic University, in a sense, should really enjoy what they've been given, making the most of these opportunities and ensuring as best we can that these traditions are passed on, enhanced to the next generation of scholars. Moving on now to the Global Compact, and there's a number of things there which he said. There are 7 key statements which together sort of make up this action plan, as I'm calling it. I just want here to look at the first of these, and that is a quote we see on the slide there from Pope Francis in the Global Compact, which appeared, I think it was October last year, delayed from a launch that never happened in May because of the pandemic. But we see words here like human persons and their value and dignity, the centre of every educational programme, and the word beauty and uniqueness. These are words which flow from reflection on the anthropology of the human person. And for many of us today in education, they are key. These form a key of way of direction for our thoughts, for our developments. And the other parts of this Global Compact talk, for example, that listening to the voices of children and young people, young adults, to promote the full participation of girls and young women in education, to see the family as the first and essential place of education, and to be open to the most vulnerable and the marginalised, to find new ways of understanding economy, politics and growth and progress, and to safeguard and cultivate our common home. And I would recommend a reflection on the Global Compact, both for individual reading and possibly for wider reflection. Who would really argue against what's being proposed there, of course? So each Catholic university will respond in different ways to this, but we do need opportunities to debate what is behind each of the 7 points. This would be a good example of dialogue in action. So to kind of bring these together, the Laudato Si and the Global Compact can lead the way in helping others, and the universities can help others to read them in a context. So the Catholic universities we see lie at the heart of the church, but also at the heart of the world. They are an act of loving service to humanity. And Catholic universities are an example in their very existence of unity and unity in diversity. They bring diversity to higher education globally, and also a unity of purpose is shown through networks like IFCU and ACISE and the other international research groups. They look both ways, seeking to shed the light of faith on contemporary issues, while ensuring that the light of reason illumines the community of faith, so that faith truly enlightens reason. And that was what was proposed in the Bull of Foundation in the University of Glasgow. So I'm conscious of time, seems to be okay though, and come now to part 3. And if I were to give us a subtitle for this, it would be something along the lines of Catholic Universities Made Visible, Revitalising the Church and Society. And at this stage, we think back to the 2 research questions from the beginning. How can the Catholic universities enhance the quality of their research and teaching? And that links in with the IFCU trends of hybrid teaching, more faculty casualisation, skills over knowledge, etc. So what follows are some ideas, maybe practical in orientation, which I will give you for further reflection. So the first of these is really for academic and support staff. I've hinted at this earlier on, but Catholic social teaching should underpin the working conditions of the staff of the Catholic University. And by staff, I refer not just to the academic staff, but to the support staff, to the catering staff, to the gardening staff, to those who fix the roof and fix the plumbing. All these things are part of the Catholic University. For all those members of staff, it should be the best place to work. And that means an adequate salary structure, bearing in mind comments previously about the need to have reasonable fee structures. We need to support reasonable holiday entitlement. We give staff as appropriate access to study leave, ensure our research facilities are up to date and up to scratch. And that is based on the fact that well-qualified and supported academics are in a better position to teach students well. And that's, as we'll see again, that in itself is an act of justice. Taking time to improve teaching is not a self-centred activity. And Catholic universities, the second point, should be trying to show how the Catholic intellectual tradition, that faith and reason dialogue and how it's reflected in our institutions, is actually willing to engage in dialogue with its own traditions and other ways of thinking. They are, in a sense, practical applications of the courtyard of the Gentiles approach advocated by Pope Benedict and what Pope Francis calls the culture of encounter. So the curriculum of the Catholic University should seek to bring together, as far as possible and practical, both liberal and vocational education, even with the current predominance, it seems, of skills over knowledge, as one of the IFCU trends puts it. But perhaps reflection on this way of partnering liberal and vocational is one area where a Catholic university could offer a model of university curricula which others might wish to emulate. So the curriculum's humanistic base offers the foundations for wider applications in real life situations. This creative engagement with the world draws on the humanities and the sciences for inspiration. It is not a choice between knowledge and skills. We offer students a robust curriculum which draws on universal knowledge and opens their minds to current thinking from a global perspective. But this is designed to foster an integral education which, as far as possible, values human contact and the importance of the community of scholars and students. The new openness we are finding to online teaching offers challenges for a traditional understanding of the academic community, the collegium, which gathers together over tea, coffee, dinner, etc. A Catholic university inspired by the theology of the Incarnation will always value human contact and will always value the shared table. Commensality is at the heart of this. Yet, of course, as we can see in the last year, online learning, as it's called, offers opportunities to broaden our reach, especially in masters and doctoral studies. And this mixed method approach does need time to become embedded in the system. And of course, by definition, a mixed method could also mean that it will look different across the globe. So we welcome this change and seek to make it a source of improvement to our offering, but with the important caveat that there are potential students and current students who might not have access to the equipment we need or they need to study successfully in this mode. And that's worth bearing in mind as we go forward. So how do we address injustice? Second question, in the context of the Catholic vision of the human person. I really would argue that all I've said above is part of how we address injustice. As I've said before, and I'll say again, the provision of excellent education is an act of justice. But in addition to this, there are other measures we can consider. Now, Catholic universities should be open to the poor and the disadvantaged. It is not enough simply to write articles on poverty and disadvantage. What we have to do is have a renewed commitment to what we call widening access, because this is an expression of a true Catholic spirit, small c. To drive this forward, we consider a wide range of scholarships, which would allow potential students from families of limited financial means to get access to higher education. But of course, scholarships require A, funding, and B, people committed to finding the funds, which could then be aligned to this noble and worthy cause. Let's also think about links between Catholic universities and schools. Thanks to technology, this could take various forms, but one welcome indicator of a Catholic identity in the university would be the visibility of Catholic university staff and maybe some undergraduate mentors in schools, working with pupils, younger pupils, maybe teenagers, to assist them in preparation for higher study. And this could be especially necessary for schools where traditionally fewer pupils go to a university. Catholic universities can also offer a variety of extension or extramural classes. Such opportunities could act as gateways for people to consider further study, but not just in theological or religious matters. Universal knowledge, to quote Newman again, in the arts and sciences is also to be made more available, perhaps online via what we call MOOCs, these massive open online courses. And at this point, it's also urgent, again, given this move towards online learning, to address these potential or real financial barriers faced by students of limited financial means. Of course, there's a need to continue to strengthen existing scholarly networks, especially between the universities in the global south and north. Of course, there can be no barrier to the formation of new networks, either as official agreements between universities or informal shared scholarly activities. And groups like ACISE and the other research groups have that on their radar for the next couple of years. Now, beauty, mentioned by Pope Francis in Laudato Si and the Global Compact, is not an optional extra for the Catholic university. I would argue the promotion of beauty and harmony on campus is actually an act of welcome and therefore an act of justice. That is not to say that only architects of the quality of Brunelleschi should design Catholic university spaces, but the campus should reflect harmony and beauty. And this extends to the quality of catering and the care afforded to teaching spaces. All of this is a necessary outcome, I would say, of reflection on the incarnation. We don't really want to impose penance on others by a lack of care in catering and inadequate teaching and study facilities. The two most highly prized words in academia are concluding remarks. We all quite like to hear those words. So all that I've said before needs some hard work. because Laudato Si and the Global Compact are not calls to rest on our laurels. Reform of Catholic identity needs clear direction, as well as active support mechanisms. And there's scope, as we know, for a variety of global and local initiatives. But also important are proper communication channels. Catholic education at any level is an act of communication. We are communicating love, communicating truth. And Catholic universities are in the public square. They are not underground. This reality is a call to action. So, for example, it's important to invest in staff who are skilled in the new media, as well as in the old media, books and computers, online plus face-to-face. And what Catholic universities have to offer, which is normally something quite significant, tremendous actually in many cases, should be easy to find on websites. I'm not saying it's not, that's not the point I'm making, but as an act of justice to students, potential students, let's make the welcome begin from the moment they approach the website to find out what is on offer in the Catholic university. And that's where groups like ACISE and IFCU and others can offer support to Catholic universities in this very, very important mission. So I end by thanking Francois, who sadly is not here today, for the invitation to speak at this gathering. I thank Lloyd for the organisation of the event. All has gone smoothly. And to be honest, most of all, I thank you for coming along and spending these 40, 50 minutes in a sort of collegium, a community of scholars, to reflect, albeit briefly, on aspects of identity and mission. And I really do hope that my thoughts have lit a fire, maybe a small fire, which will bring heat and light to debates on the future of Catholic universities. In a world and a church where it's so easy to hide behind barriers and adopt a mentality of the culture war, especially when identity politics seem to be big news, Catholic universities can and should be a place where reason flourishes. If we do this, we will indeed be, as we're called to be, the light of nations. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Leona. It was really interesting to hear you on this topic, and how you opened giving some ideas on what we can do to show that Catholic identity, in fact, is an added value, if I could say, for our universities. And the work that is being done by our institutions in this field is, to me, a commitment to what Catholic universities are. I mean, institutions of the Church, and this is something that is quite important, and that maybe we don't underline so much. So thank you very much. Please raise your hand, and if you want to add a comment or to ask a question, it would be most welcome. So we have Anthony McLaren that has a question. Please unmute your mic, and we hear you.
Hi, it's actually Richard Solomon. Sorry for the name description, but also from St Mary's University, and I thought it was an absolutely fascinating and insightful talk. So many thanks to Leonardo. I wanted just to ask Leonardo for his thoughts on the area of welfare of staff and the matters of sort of social justice as it applies to the wider university. And it's in the context that universities, and even Catholic universities, generally are living in a world fundamentally dominated by capitalism and the concept of creative destruction. And what this means is that we're all faced with pressures to continually adopt our business models. And there's pressure to deal with keeping fees reasonable, keeping fees low. There are potential threats to fee levels. All this means that in order to have the resources to continuing investing, ultimately for the benefit of students and society, there's a pressure to constantly change what we do. And this in itself can have, a hugely challenging impact on an organization and its staff. And there can be a tension, I think, between wanting to provide the best possible example of an organization committed to social justice, and then the speed, however, the speed with which you have to change how you're organized, which can also have an impact on, for example, the number of jobs in an organization. There's a tension because the higher you want the levels of benefits to be, for example, the harder you have to look at business model, and therefore the potentially greater stress there may be on that side. You can have it one way, but you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it when you're operating in a world where there's continually changing expectations around fee levels. And I hope the question's clear. But I wondered if Leonardo, you had any thoughts on this?
Well, there's a lot in what you've said there, Richard, and I'm reminded, as you're speaking of Lampedusa's comment by Bardo, for things to stay the same, they have to change often, and if we want really to continue to offer our best, there's got to be a sense of movement, of trying our best to align ourselves with those places, those people who can support us in what we do. Now, we have a tremendous resource in Catholic universities globally in the numbers of people who are involved in the life of Catholic schools, not just Catholic people. So it's possible to have that idea that we are not alone, as one of the comments in the chat box says, and that can be a source of consolation, but when you're dealing, I think, with the idea of fees and how fees can inform the wider life of the university, that calls for caution, it calls for support for staff who might feel under pressure. One of the ways we can support staff is to ensure that our internal structures are not anonymous, that people are gathered together in ways in which their scholarship and their identity is valued. In that way, by promoting that culture of scholarship and reaching out into that world of finance or research funding, we may find openings which we might not find if people are in their own silos too often. Again, that's only the beginnings of an answer, but it's to try to draw on the resources, on all that we have in the Catholic university sector, so that we can have the impact. We can have that sense of, we're not just here to cater to a minority interest, but we're part of the public square. So thank you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or question from the audience?
Okay, well, that's okay.
Stefan, please.
Thank you.
Oh, Steve.
Hi, Leonardo. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Glasgow,
Yes.
Glasgow speaks to Glasgow.
Glasgow speaks to Glasgow, yes.
So I got a few thoughts I'd like to sort of stitch together. I'll try and compress it to stay within the bounds of the time we've got left. But I was interested in this remark you made about enhancing the quality of research and teaching. And what was on my mind is that's a term we hear often, but it doesn't really focus on the choices of subjects that we research. It just focuses on quality. So sort of, could you draw in from many of your remarks where these ideas might feed into what we choose to research? And then the things I'd like you to try and link it to is when we think of church's communion, this communio, church's union, this revolution that we're living just now, this online revolution, which has transformed the landscape, to what extent can we, as Catholics working within Catholic universities, stitch together a fabric, a universal fabric across the world to draw in all that talent, all that ability into a communion of effort in relation to this quality of research and teaching? So maybe that's I'll stop there. Those are the things I'd like to hear your thoughts on.
Thank you, Steve. I'll begin with the second one about how communio can help us gather. In a sense, what we're doing today is an expression of communio. Yeah. From various parts of the globe, we can see in the chat box from all over the place, coming together to share, to listen, to talk. And if we go back to this time last year, who would have thought we'd be having so many international events in universities? So this notion of universality or internationalization and all these attendant words which are part of the discourse are not foreign to Catholic education, but they are actually part of our language. The notion of universality, openness to others throughout the world. So I would be hopeful that even as we maybe move into more face-to-face teaching in 2021, some of the, I think would be the benefits of this mode of international webinars could be retained. And it's not just filling a gap, it's actually giving us a new way to connect and find what we can do. To your first question, research and teaching, it's how we see those words as partners. Are we teaching in the areas in which we are doing research? Now there is something which, to me, goes to the heart of an academic's identity, because we could easily end up in a situation where we have a range of teaching in classes here, but the things we are researching here could be only slightly connected. And to see in the Catholic University that how the curriculum should be integrated in that way of, we are advocating specialisation of staff, yes, because that's how it works, but to allow the students to have a universal experience by having these educational experience by people who are actually developing expertise because they teach, they write, they speak, they make connections in that scholarly discipline. Sometimes I think that discourse is slightly lost, and maybe the Catholic universities can be a place where that can be bound together again and offer that kind of vision to the wider range of universities. Research and teaching links, as we call it. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Leonardo. Nice to see you.
And you.
Thank you. Any other question, or maybe something to share from our colleagues from all over the world? I think that we are truly an open talk with a universal talk, because everyone is coming from everywhere today. So anything to share, it would be good around Catholic identity in your country, your university, or an example, experiences. It would be welcome.
No.
So,
okay.
Maybe we can close this session and well, last call. If there is a question, tell us. But we are getting. We are going to close. So our next meeting will be on March 24, or around the changes, the process of change in the Catholic universities.
Yes, can I?
Please.
You're on mute.
Yes, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
Sure, thank you very much. I'm Mangadar Situmorang from Parahyangan Catholic University in Bandung, Indonesia. Mm-hmm. So it is already at 9 p.m. here. Mm-hmm. So good
evening.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for inspiring, 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 for presentation, Leonardo.
Thank you.
But we in Indonesia, you cut 20s, yeah, 20 universities or higher education institution in Indonesia. And when we are also working hard now about how to bring the Laudato Si to be materialized, as our society are really living in a very developing situation. So to some extent, we may not have enough attention about the environment, still very much working on how to live in terms of economics and the basic needs, to fulfill the basic needs. On the other side, we are also living in a very, let's say, with our fellow citizen, with the majority of Muslim. So we try to be part of the communion also by asking others to join with our universities. So this is another big challenge also for us, how to keep our Catholic identities as to be, let's say, have ecological perspective, attention, but at the same time also to be open to other communities.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion about in the situation about the Catholic identities in this kind of, let's say, society?
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're beginning to break up near the end. I got your question. I think the
Hello? Is it this?
Yeah, it's okay. I think the response to the question would be very much along the lines of making the Catholic University as good as we can in our circumstances. So people are attracted by the openness, by the way we conduct ourselves, by the type of curriculum we have to offer. Regarding the ecological aspect of Laudato Si, Pope Francis very carefully draws out from the personal to the communal by asking for people to make small changes in the way they live, the way they make decisions, and to broaden that and have those implemented in the life of the various communities and institutions, and then take that as a step to wider and maybe more impactful, to coin a phrase, political action. So it's in a sense all of these things knitted together. And the notion of communio can be extended beyond the Christian community as well, that people who believe in God and who search for meaning, who search for the truth, as we found in Gaudium et Spes and the Vatican Council, are very much part of that discussion.